Welcome to episode 2 on volume. The intent of this video is to understand how volume works in the digital sphere and how to tame it. Today's course overview will be going over the 0 dB level, how to gain stage, and how to manage volume with different effects. All right, remember when I said that I'm speaking from personal experience? Well, this is really about the show because I'm not an expert in volume management or a sound engineer. And if a sound engineer were to watch this, he'd probably hate me, but not to discredit all of your knowledge and training. I really don't care because this is an art form and the analytics don't lie. This track breaks all of volume management to the extreme, and it has almost 12,000 plays and 1,000 likes, and people love it through the comments. So I'm going to do my best to explain to you the 0 dB level and how volume works in Ableton. So the max volume that you can push or export a sound in Ableton is 0 dB. So the way that this looks like is you have a ceiling at 0 dB. And if you push a sound above the ceiling, let's say this is 6 decibels worth of data, and we export it, all 6 decibels here gets clipped at the ceiling, and that clipping adds distortion to the sound. So let's take this drum loop, for example, and play it. And if we look on our master track on the bottom right, you can see these green levels. And they're green right now because it's not clipping. And if we press tab to go to the session view and we play, it says negative 1.06, meaning we have negative 1.06 decibels worth of headroom. So we can bump this up an entire decibel, like so. And if we go back to tab and look, now we have 0.06 decibels worth of headroom, and we're still not clipping, but we're very, very close to that ceiling. If we're super dramatic and we bump it up 6 decibels and we play, now we're clipping by almost 5 decibels. And if we were to export this the way that it is on that volume change, you would lose that 5 decibels of information, and it would add some distortion to the sound. We could export this exactly the way that it is, and I think it would sound exactly the same. There might be some distortion, but the human ear, especially if you're not like a professional producer or like a sound engineer, you might not even be able to pick it up because your ears actually aren't even tuned to that. I'm not the only one that breaks the rules. Like here's Emorphic's Hurtful Intentions track, and if we look, 6 to 7 decibels above the ceiling, Jacqueline Hyde Memory Lapse. 6 to 7 decibels again above the ceiling, my Prosecute Face Mask track. 8 decibels above the ceiling. So yeah, we're all pushing it way above the ceiling, but we still enjoy the sound because a lot of the times we like that clipping and distortion. A really good analogy that I'll explain and finish it off with this is that think of Ableton as an empty glass, and all of your sounds are water. And you're filling up that glass, and the goal in most mainstream professional music is to not overflow that glass. Do not go above the 0 dB line, because you can't drink the water and enjoy the water that's overflowing out of the glass because it's not contained in your hand to be able to drink it. However, in dubstep, it's a very obscure art form, and we love to overflow glasses and make a mess and just be violent with our music. However, there are ways to tame the overflowing of the water with audio effects, which we'll get into the later part of this video. Just remember the key concept is that the max ceiling in Ableton is 0 dB. Anything above that gets clipped on export. Okay, now I'm going to explain to you gain staging, which is just a method to keep all of your sounds below the 0 dB line while you produce. I don't do this at all, but I feel like it would be rude and wrong not to go over it given the topic. And we're going to push that analogy from before a little bit further. So rather than just an empty drinking glass that you're filling up with water, we're actually making a cocktail. And all of the components of your cocktail are components of your song. So like your drums are the ice, and your vodka is this guitar, and then your mixer is this atmosphere, right? And if you played them all together at 0 dB, you're clipping almost 6 decibels, which is equivalent to taking all of the ice and the whole bottle of vodka and mixer and smashing it into a glass, and you're just not going to do that because you wouldn't be able to enjoy it. So gain staging would be setting a hard discipline on all your tracks to like negative 8 decibels so that you always have 8 decibels worth of headroom per track. And if we were to play this right now and look, we have negative 2 decibels worth of headroom when all 3 of these components are playing at the same time. So we can go ahead and bump up our vodka like 2 shots of vodka. I'm kidding. Let's listen. Yeah, so we have negative 1.4 with the headroom. I feel like my drum's a little quiet, so I can bump them up a little bit. Let's go back and look. And now we're 0.01 over the dB line. So if we play this and listen, this is such a poor, rough example, but like technically this is mixed to the 0 dB line, but like I find this so unbelievably tedious and annoying, and it's just to try to follow some industry standard. And keep in mind, some dubstep tracks go up to like 100, over 100 tracks, and the more mixers and the more ice and alcohols that you add, the more you have to gain stage, the more levels you have to adjust. And I find that too tedious. And I don't think you're ever going to enjoy music producing if you're going in with this mindset, like I can't go above 0 dB because that's what the rule is. And you're just going to spend the majority of your time adjusting volume levels and not having fun at all. And you're just going to get mad at your own art and yourself because you're not accomplishing the goal of keeping it at the 0 dB line. So yeah, don't stress about this, at least from my opinion. The next part, I'm going to show you how I go about managing the 0 dB line and pushing my sounds and technically not overflowing. Okay, now I'm going to show you the 3 main ways that people manage their audio levels within Ableton, usually on their master chain, so Ableton doesn't do it for you. And the 3 main ways are clippers, limiters, and compressors. And each music producer prefers one over the other, or will use one over the other depending on what genre they make. They each do different things. And keep in mind, I am pushing every effect to the maximum just so that we can clearly and audibly see the examples of before and after. So this is the bass loop that we're working with. There's nothing on this, it's just by itself. And then I pushed it into a clipper at 8 decibels, which looks like this, right? And the entire audio file, again, is being pushed 8 decibels into this ceiling here. And when it hits that, any audio file, boom, just gets clipped. Hard clipped off, which causes it to look like this. As you can see, this is the clipper in action. If I were to lower this more, you can see that it's just flatlined here because that's where it's being chopped off at. So let me go ahead. I'm gonna lower this down so it doesn't blast through your ears. Let's just listen to the before, the after. It's a little bit louder, and I want you to pay attention to that white noise hiss from the sub before. There's like little white noise. It's like, it just sounds like with the sub. It's there, it's just not as prominent, but then with the clipper, it's way more loud, again, because that hiss is then being pushed 8 dB with all of the other sounds and then being clipped at the ceiling, creating distortion. This is what I use on all of my tracks lately. Actually, this is on my master chain. This is exactly the same settings that I use on all my songs. It's just the G clip pushed to 4 decibels. Again, so all of the sounds of my project are being raised to that ceiling and just chopped off there for a nice distortion taste. So that's the clipper. The next method is a limiter. So this is the before, and this is the exaggerated after. And the way that a limiter works is it's listening to the loudest parts of your song, and whoever is too tall immediately just gets pushed down to fit the rest of the song. So as you can see, this part of this gun is like super loud. It's like reaching the top. And then when the limiter sees it, it just squashes it down to fit into the window. Obviously, this doesn't sound good, because on this limiter example, I'm pushing the entire thing 8 dB just so that we can dramatically see what it's doing. And pay attention that all of the levels are relatively balanced here. It's kind of keeping the dynamics. You can see that there's like dips here, but it's still trying to push all those peaks down to try and keep it with an audibly safe level. So that's what a limiter does. The next thing is a compressor, and it acts very similar to a limiter, just a little bit slower. So this is the before, and then the after. And now, as you can see, we can start to still hear these peaks come through, and there's a reason for that. So let me go ahead and bring this gun back over here for a side-by-side example. As you can see, the gun that hasn't been touched, very, very loud. And then when that gets fed into the compressor reads it, and it kind of reads it a little slow. That's why some of this information still stays really loud. And then once it kicks in, it starts to lower all of that tall information to fit the rest of the song and try and keep it balanced. So the difference between a limiter and compressor is that a limiter will instantaneously lower that loud sound, while a compressor kind of does it slowly and gradually, depending on how fast you let your limiter read it. So I'm not going to get too much into the compressor, but this attack knob right here, that really just tells the compressor how fast to turn on. If we were to lower this all the way down to its fastest attack, sometimes it will actually add like a legit clipping sound. It'll sound like a ticking that is undesirable as hell. You really don't always want that. So just know that there are differences between these three. There's a clipper, a limiter, and a compressor. Let's just look at the visual examples one more time. Clipper, everything's pushed up to that hard ceiling. Once it crosses, chopped off. Hard distortion, hard crunch. Limiter, the loudest peaks, once they hit that threshold, they get pushed down to a relatively safe distance for the rest of the sounds to try to keep sounds balanced, and it does it instantaneously. Whereas a compressor will slowly push all of the loudest parts of your song down and try to keep everything nice, rounded, and smooth. So those are the three ways that you would manage your volume levels on your master chain. Most people will generally put a clipper, a limiter, or a compressor on their master chain, depending on how they want their music to sound. And this is something that we will fine tune later, but that is how you would manage volume. Fantastic. We went over everything for volume today. I showed you the 0 dB level in Ableton and how anything above that, zero ceiling, gets clipped on export. We went over the method of gain staging, which just allows you to create a bunch of headroom below that ceiling so that you can balance your sound so that they don't go over. I do encourage you not to stress about that and try not to be a perfectionist, because you just won't have fun and you'll spend way too much time trying to balance sounds, and you'll even get lost in your own mix, thinking like, is this really how I want it to sound? Is this too loud? Is this too quiet? I don't know, especially if you don't have experience. So just screw all of that. Just have fun and tweak it until you enjoy it. And then the last part was the three methods of volume management, the three most popular being the clipper, limiter, and compressor. And I showed you the audio and visual examples of each. My recommendation is from here on out, get the GVST clip for free on Google. I believe it's a free VST. Click and drag that from your plugins folder within Ableton onto your master track, set it to 4 dB, and create that as your default template. So that way, from here on out, while following this course, you're following the same master chain as me, and our sounds can sound similar, and you know that you're following along, at least audibly, with me. The next video, we're going over stereo imaging and psychoacoustics. So we're going to be getting more into that EQ and kind of pulling apart more of the assets of the EQ and seeing what it does. So I'll go ahead and catch you over in the next video. Thanks for watching.